Today, I was going to talk about congestive heart failure and an herb called Ting Li Zi. Ting Li Zi. And first of all, I'll talk about congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is when you have a weak heart, and that results in fluid developing in your body. Most of the time, the most common places people notice fluid developing is in their legs, in the calves and ankles, and then also in the lungs. So basically, legs and the lungs. And when this happens, you can have a lot of different symptoms. Obviously, when you have swelling in the legs, you'll see that and notice that. But when you have fluid in the lungs, you may not know what it is at first. Most of the time, people first start just feeling more tired. They have fatigue, they can't walk as far. They may notice that they feel short of breath if they lay down flat. A lot of times, people start laying at an incline, even without necessarily realizing why, but they just notice that they feel better that way. And they may have to prop themselves up with a few pillows. Some people, when it's really severe, they actually just sleep in a sitting up position, kind of like in a recliner. And that's a sign of fluid in the lungs. And what happens is when you lay down flat, the fluid tends to distribute throughout the whole lungs, and it causes you to feel short of breath because it's filling up that lung cavity. But when you sit up, it goes down and it allows more space within the lungs for your lungs to still expand and breathe normally. And so we call that pulmonary edema in Western medicine. And so you can have fluid buildup in the lungs and have shortness of breath, difficulty laying flat. And those are some of the classic signs. We call it congestive heart failure because the heart is the organ that is responsible for pumping the blood. And we think of it as pumping the fluid that circulates in the body. And so if you have weakness in your heart doesn't pump that fluid out that well, and it can get backed up and build up in the lungs. There's different types of heart failure. You can have problems with the ability of your heart to squeeze strongly. You can have problems with your heart not relaxing properly, and there's a number of different subtypes. But congestive heart failure is kind of a catch-all term to describe fluid accumulating in the lungs and it being related to the heart in some manner. Now, the herb that I wanted to talk about in terms of treatment today is an herb called Ting Li Zi. Ting Li Zi. And this is actually an herb that it's considered a cold herb. And so, like we've talked about before, some herbs are warm herbs, hot herbs, neutral, cold, and very cold. So Ting Li Zi is a very cold herb. So it's not going to be necessarily meant for everybody. But if you either balance that with other type herbs, or if you're a more hot type constitution, then this might be a good herb for you. And Ting Li Zi is an herb that it goes to two organs, the lung and the bladder in Chinese medicine. It targets those two organs, and it has an ability to what we call descend the qi, and especially descend the lung qi. And so in Chinese medicine, what's happening is the fluid is accumulating because of a failure of the lungs to properly descend the fluids and descend the lung qi. And because the lung qi or the lung energy has been obstructed, it is not able to metabolize the water properly, and the water builds up in the lungs. And so that's actually where Ting Li Zi is useful for. And so some patients who are diagnosed with congestive heart failure in Western medicine may actually be having a root lung problem in Chinese medicine, a failure of the lung qi to descend. And in those scenarios, you can have fluid buildup in the lungs. It can look like congestive heart failure from a Western medical standpoint. But in Chinese medicine, our treatment is going to be completely different in that we're going to treat the lungs to help improve the ability of the lungs to descend the qi and resolve the fluid in the lungs in that manner. And in that scenario, Ting Li Zi is a herb that would be beneficial to use. So that's a little bit about Ting Li Zi, congestive heart failure, and we'll see you next time.